Welcome back to Our Community. Susie Thomas visiting with Jesse Ayers. He is Composer of the Year for the state of Ohio and the Ohio Music Teachers Association. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
That is just, how does that news arrive to you? How are you told that?
It was an email.
Just an email,
I
huh?
I knew I had been nominated and was asked to submit material. So it's juried.
Yeah.
A panel of
Yes.
jurists looks over submissions from composers to choose one person, and then got an email, said congratulations, and then let me know the parameters. And since there's a commission, of course, there's the contract, spells out the parameters, so I know what size, what length piece, what they're looking for. Et cetera, et cetera.
Well,
So
Malone,
it was very exciting news.
give this man a raise. That's all I'm going to say. Something else happening in Chicago. Tell me about.
Yes, 2 days before the premiere of the piano four-hand piece we were just discussing will be the Chicago premiere of a piece I wrote in 2016. The piece is called There's a Stirring in the Water, and it's co-written with a musician from Akron named Charles Myrick's Jr., Chuck Myrick's. Chuck is a multi-talented, multifaceted man. First, he's a very gifted musician. He's a gifted performer on the keyboard. He's a composer and arranger. He composed a full-length contemporary opera on the life of the Apostle Paul, formerly Saul of Tarsus. He is ordained pastor and on the pastoral staff at the Arlington Church of God. He is the Chief Operating and Development Officer of the National Association of the Church of God. Wow. And he's the former Vice President and General Manager of Word Records, which a label I imagine you know. So everything from the music industry and in the church, leadership positions in both as a general manager and a very fine musician. So,
And a local guy.
yeah, and it was an honor for me to get to work with him on this. This piece, it's a celebration of the African-American spiritual. The writing of the piece, I think, is really the brainchild of Christopher Wilkins, the conductor of the Akron Symphony. He invited Chuck and I to dinner, and we talked about this idea of having a piece that celebrates the African-American spiritual, composed for the Akron Symphony and the Akron Symphony Chorus, and the Youth Excellence Performing Workshop, YPA, of Akron. And that's teenage high school students and maybe junior high that are involved very heavily in music and dance and art.
So is that where it was premiered?
And that it was premiered by Akron in 2016. And that was really a wonderful experience.
Wow.
And so, as I mentioned, to celebrate the African-American spiritual and especially the range of emotions that is found in those. The spirituals are a very important body of American folk song, perhaps the most important.
And why do you say that? Let's talk about that.
Well, it's one of the first musics that's truly American. We're talking about American folk music as opposed to the European imports we brought over with us when we came here. And it's not the only. You know, jazz is very uniquely American, but the spirituals predate that. The Scottish music of the Southern Highlands, like East Tennessee, where I'm from, but that was brought over from Scotland, and for hundreds of years didn't change. Musicologists would come from Europe over to the mountains of East Tennessee and North Carolina so they could study Scottish folk music from a few centuries earlier because it hadn't changed much because those folks were isolated. So, but anyway, back to the spiritual, this huge range of emotion, and we wanted to cover all of those in this piece from the what's called the Songs of Sorrow, which would be an example would be Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child, that really expresses the despair and the suffering of living in slavery.
Yes.
There are songs of sustaining faith, would be like Steal Away and Deep River. You know, steal away and be with Jesus, and Deep River, my home is over Jordan. This world is not my home. My home is across the Jordan. And then also the songs of victory and celebration and freedom, like Ain't Got Time to Die. I keep so busy praising my Jesus, I ain't got time to die. And so all of those are involved in this. And then Chuck arranged the order of the songs and the shape of the narrative, the shape of the story, and he did the choral arranging. And then my role was to put the orchestra with it. And we talked. We didn't want it just to be chorus with orchestra accompaniment, but that they were equal partners. So we opened up space here and there between spirituals where the orchestra plays. So sometimes it's just chorus, sometimes it's just orchestra, and obviously a lot of the times they're together.
Thinking of all those different kinds of spirituals that there were, what kind is There's a Stirring in the Water? Is that the hopeful kind, or what kind is that?
Well, that's not a particular spiritual. That is the title of the entire piece.
All of them together.
Yes, and Chuck's idea on that, with all of these, there's always this undercurrent coming from some of the vocal parts. There's a stirring in the water. There's a stirring in the water, and then it'll go into spiritual. And that's sort of the connecting thing.
Cool.
And we don't tell you what the stirring is. Chuck doesn't until the last few chords.
Is it
which
too
is
much
there's
of a
a stirring
spoiler?
in the water to be free.
Oh, awesome.
And that's the big climax. And all these songs lead to that, as I said, through this narrative of the suffering songs to the devotional songs to the songs of
hope.
victory and hope.
I have read, now tell me if I'm just way off base on this. I've read somewhere that spiritual, it meant so much to the community, and that was a way to praise and a way to, express suffering and express hope and so forth. But that there were sometimes interwoven secret messages as far as passing along information about how to get out of there, to get onto the Underground Railroad.
And I am
was
not
one
an
way to
expert
communicate.
in that field. I have heard the same things,
Okay.
but I'm not an expert. That
I like
sometimes,
to think that it's true.
That there were the secret messages. That I will have to defer to someone with far more expertise. I can tell you the spirituals were unknown to the world in general, except for people that lived around the areas of slavery that would hear the singing. And 5 years after the war, after the Civil War, in 1870, there was a college founded in Middle Tennessee, Fisk University.
Yes.
And as a fundraising measure, and of course, like any new college, especially, this was established for the education of freed slaves. So I'm sure funds were hard-pressed and hard to come by. One of their English professors had some music experience and said, we've got some students here that can really sing. So he put together a 9-voice chorus. And they became known as the Fisk Jubilee Singers. They took this music to the world. So the first year they went on a long tour, and it was fraught with hardship, sometimes not enough food, sometimes sleeping in the rain, even in northern states being turned away from hotels. By the second year, they were touring Europe. They were heard by some influential people.
Wow.
They sang for President Grant at the White House. They sang for Queen Victoria. They were singing for the crowned heads of state in Europe. And if you can imagine that prior to the war, these were people serving tables, if they had the good job. And in 1872, they find themselves seated as the guests of honor with kings and queens, with people waiting on them.
How awesome.
And it was because they were so very good. The music was so different that both the sad songs being so soulful, Europeans were just taken with it, like we've not heard anything at this level. And then, of course, those fast, up-tempo songs, I guess we would say jazzy to our ear, or, reminds us of current gospel music, but really up-tempo. So it's an amazing story. We have a book at Malone that I read was written by a man on the tour with him. So,
Wow.
this is an 1880 book we have in the library saying, here's what the tours were like. So I've read that, and that was quite fascinating.
Very cool.
I don't think we ever got to why I'm talking about the piece, which
yes.
is
Why?
on October the 23rd. This piece is going to be performed in Chicago. It will be at Chicago premiere by the Chicago Bar Association Orchestra and Chorus. And as the name implies, this orchestra and the chorus are all members of the Chicago Bar Association. So these are lawyers. The conductor is David Katz. He is a very fine conductor. He studied conducting 5 years under Charles Bruch, who was very well-known composer. Matter of fact, we had David come to Malone a few years ago. He has a one-man show that's fascinated on the art of conducting, where essentially he is playing the character of Charles Bruch and how he would teach students by being pretty hard on them. But he also forged those students into being some of the best conductors in the country. So David is the founder of the American Prize. And he learned of this piece because Chuck and I submitted it for the American Prize, and we were fortunate. We got a special judge's citation for best use of material from another source.
Wow. Well, congratulations for that as
And
well.
so that's where David learned about the piece. And then after that, he asked if it was okay if he kept the score for a little while longer. And of course, being a composer, said, sure.
Share it
Don't know
with
what's
some
coming
lawyer
from this.
friends
but,
of his.
Yeah. And so they are doing that. So I'm very excited. Chuck and I will both be there to hear that. We're very excited to be at the. Any of you happen to be going to Chicago that week at the St. James Cathedral at the corner of North Huron and East Wabash? I might have the North and East flip-flopped. I don't know my Chicago, but Huron and Wabash at the St. James Cathedral. And so we're really...
On October 23rd.
Yeah, Wednesday night. So we're really looking forward to that.
You are going to be hopping around here the 23rd in Chicago, the 25th at Lourdes, and the 28th back here in Canton.
It's going to be a busy weekend. But we can't get from Chicago back to Canton and then get back to Toledo, so we just leave Chicago and lollygag a little bit around Toledo until the next day and then get home.
And then make it. I'm fascinated by the fact that there is a group of singing attorneys. Have you heard them yet?
I have not. So I guess if they miss a note, I jump up and say objection.
Oh gosh! Oh, I'm so glad you said that.
I'm sure they're very fine. I have looked up some performances on YouTube, and it's very fine orchestra, very fine chorus. So really excited about this opportunity.
Jesse, it's fun just to go to your website and take a look at all of your work. That massive amount of work that you've done. Tell us a little bit about what we will find there.
Well, the website is jesseayers.com, JESSEAYERS.com. And then I think the navigation's pretty straightforward. There's pages where you can look up a catalog of my works and, categorized by orchestra, by band, by chorus, et cetera, et cetera. And then I have a page you can click on of videos. So that's various performances of my work. Some are audio only, some are audio and video. And so you can go there and see some of my pieces. And if you like them, fine. And if you don't like them, you know how to close the window.
And go somewhere else.
Yeah, or pick another piece.
So much fun to find there. And so many of the things that you have written require audience participation, which is kind of unique to you.
Well, some do. Now, this Stirring in the Water, well, other than hand clapping, we encourage, it ends with Ain't Got Time to Die, and there's a passage where we just loop that one, glory and honor, glory and honor, glory, and that's like the next to the last line, and get the audience to start clapping.
Got to. How can you listen to that music and not clap?
Yeah, I think they'd clap anyway.
Kind of got to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just try
unless
and stop
they're really trying to be self-restrained to say, well, I'm
yeah.
not supposed to clap at a classical music concert. I have done some pieces with audience participation. The best known would be it's a work for concert band and orchestra, and then also have a version for concert band narrator with unorthodox audience participation. Also have an orchestral version. That's been done a number of places around the country. Valparaiso, the orchestra did it at the University of Denver. It has been done in Washington State by the Yakima Symphony Orchestra.
Wow. And it's called?
Jericho.
Yes.
And it's about the Old Testament Battle of Jericho. So the narrator is essentially doing the words from the Old Testament, from the text from Joshua, while the orchestra or band is playing music sort of like a film score. So it's, no film, but the narration and an underscoring, and then the audience participates with some battle shouts and things like that.
They make the walls fall down. Well, we do want to remind everybody around here locally on October 28th, you can hear Shinkansen Bullet Train at Malone University in the Stewart Room, 7:30. Jesse Ayers, thank you for all you bring to our community.
Well, it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me once again.
Come back.
Okay.